Welcome back to Quintessence Virtual Retreat, Embrace Healing. I am so pleased to be joined here today with Samantha Sweetwater. She is a soul mentor and author and also a ceremonial leader. And I'm just so pleased you could join us today for this discussion. And I would love to just start by opening sacred space and taking a couple breaths together, just grounding in. I'd like to just invite all of our participants to just take a moment and think about their own personal intention for our time together so that you can really be kind of extracting the nuggets from this discussion that are really relevant to where you're at and your journey. And I also want to just thank everyone for showing up and investing their energy and time into their healing journey, because we know that when we do our own personal healing work, it has this amazing ripple effect out into our families, our communities, and the entire planet, which is so calling and asking for us to do this work so that we can really embody our spirit on this planet at this time. And so with that, Samantha, would you kindly just share with us a bit about your work?
Sure. Yeah. Hello, everyone. It's really such a delight to be here. And Maggie, it's wonderful to meet you for the first time. I am, well, what do I do? I'm the founder of a body of work called Soulucent, and I do spiritual executive mentoring and also soul brand coaching with people. And both really enjoyable spaces. And I also work with plant medicine, and I'm the founder of a ministry called One Life Circle that holds ceremonies to do group-based healing, and in the context of communing with each other and with sacrament and with source and nature. And that's a huge part of my life. It's a little less so right now during COVID, since we're not gathering right now.
Yeah.
And that's where I come from and what I do.
And I love that you're bringing in this this beautiful wisdom of working with plants, because we've evolved for so long with plants, and now we're at this very beautiful time in our evolution as a country, I'm going to say, where we're starting to allow more and more people access to the healing powers of plants. And I'm bringing in specifically cannabis because there are such a myriad of ways that this one plant is an ally for us as a human race. And regardless of what your beliefs are around cannabis, I think that it's now necessary to look at what your beliefs are around plant medicine. And I invite people to just be aware of, we have been programmed, I believe, and not to start on kind of a weird note, but I believe we've been, really programmed to have very specific beliefs around certain plants for the benefit of pharmaceutical companies, for the benefit of business, because the reality is they cannot make the profit that they desire to make off of a plant that they can off of a pill. And I have an extensive background in herbalism, I have a master's in natural health, and I was actually an apprentice to an herbalist for 3 years. And so I know that actually 60% of all pharmaceuticals are just chemical replications of active constituents of herbs. So what does that mean? That means they look at a plant, they say, well, what is the active constituent of this plant? And let's see if we can chemically replicate it. And I won't get into how that's not really ideal exactly, but there are implications of that where it's actually better to just consume the plants. So sorry I got right on my soapbox there, Samantha, but I love plants. And so I'm glad that we can weave that into our journey around, embracing healing. And I'd love to start with just like really understanding what you perceive healing is.
Yeah, it's a huge question. It's I'm writing about that a lot right now.
Ooh, juicy.
I think there's a couple principles that I would say, that healing is a process, not a destination. And it's very tempting to view healing as a destination. We get marketed destinations on our healing path. And healing is not a destination. It's actually an ambient shift in the way we experience the center of ourselves, the way we experience the oceanic flow of moods and body sensations and competencies and capacities with relationship and self-care and communication and spiritual capacity. So one thing, that's one, that it's a process, not a destination.
It's a process. Yes. Beautiful.
And then I would also say that healing is a gradual and continuous increase in wholeness. That the hypothesis that I work off of is, I call it the wholeness hypothesis. And my hypothesis is that we're actually evolutionarily designed to be happy, healthy, and well adjusted, empowered organisms inside a larger biological field of beauty, that we were well designed to collaborate with each other and with the field. And I'm sure there were times in civilization's evolution and human evolution where there was more or less violence in our experience, but that we are more or less evolved to experience wholeness as our natural state. And so wholeness is a kind of pinnacle point, which neurophysiologically and spiritually looks like being really anchored in yourself as your soul. Yes. And feeling generally as a closer to the spectrum of good than the spectrum of not good, of sucky, and so that's also what I look at as wholeness. And then that has all kinds of ways of manifesting in terms of how we behave, how we interact, how we feel at home, how we feel comfortable and at peace. And like the higher spectrums being happiness and joy and empathy and bliss, but like the center of it being what I call divine okayness, and actually just feeling more or less okay, like being able to sleep, being able to relax, being able to digest, being able to breathe, to communicate needs and wants and desires. Those things are really fundamental to healing, and trauma gets in the way of them. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And a couple things that just ding, ding, ding in my brain. One is like in this journey of healing, this daily practice, right? It's basically becomes a life practice, right? Of healing. But I'm aware of like one of the cool things about healing is that as you are integrating more of yourself, as you are becoming more whole, you get the awareness of when you're out of balance, so to speak. And so say I'm spiraling out, something happened and I'm feeling stressed. Yesterday, I literally had one of those days where it was like within a 2-hour time frame, I'm trying to like close a house that's for sale. My husband's in Africa. I'm a single parent. I have 2 business meetings, and everyone, I'm trying to get this article published for a major publication that's due that day. We're on the last things, and it's literally everything needs to be done now. Smoke detectors in the house, everything now, going now. And so in that moment before, it would have been so easy for my nervous system, because I can feel that now where I'm at that edge, and it's literally that adrenaline is like a light switch for me. And so I could feel like I'm at the edge, but I was able to be like, okay, I'm supported because I have this amazing nanny that's coming to care for my child. I'm supported because I'm just going to go one thing at a time. And so I was actually able to moderate that and be like, okay. And then what I said to myself was, all of the things that I had planned to do today, I'm not going to do them anymore, because I know that there are things that are going to move me forward, but they don't need to be done today. So I'm not even going to look at my original to-do list. And so I'm saying this because it's because of all the healing work I've done, I was able to not set myself over the edge. And that was out of self-compassion and love for myself. And so I'm using that as an example because that's the gift that healing gives us, right? Is that because I'm not always, so what's it look like if I hadn't done it? Oh, I'm always operating at my edge. I'm always going off my edge. And I have to, self-medicate with whatever my medication is of choice. And I have to disembody because now I don't feel safe in my body. And now I'm spiraling out, if that makes sense. I'm spiraling out of my body, out of my center. And so when you're in this healing journey, one of the beautiful gifts is you realize like, oh, I'm starting to spiral. I'm getting overwhelmed. What can I do to decompress my, the other thing was like the nanny wanted to bring my child back early. And I said, you know what? I have literally been on go until 15 minutes ago. And I need the half an hour that we've agreed upon, right? So I can set boundaries, because I need to decompress so I can be there for my daughter. So I'm using that as an example because it's so important that we set our lives up and we love ourselves enough. And that's why I call this embrace healing, because it's like, embrace it every day. Embrace the healing because you deserve it. As a divine being on the planet, you deserve this energy. And the other thing, that was another long, for some reason, Samantha, you're just bringing up a lot of juiciness in me. But like the other thing that just dawned on me was like this connection between wholeness and contentment. And that this okayness could also be, some people might think of it as like just a place of contentment, like just a place of, and that's like your baseline. You know what I mean? Like baseline contentment in life. And so I'm really curious, like, obviously you've been on this path for a long time. And would you be willing to share with us kind of like, what does your healing journey look like? Like, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, my journey's been a very long and up and down journey. I think there's really different indexes that we experience of where our trauma comes from.
Yes.
I had a relatively stable early childhood that had, some attachment wounding, but not huge trauma. But I was really a sensitive kid and came into my teens feeling really like a misfit and not aligned with school or culture. And so I started my healing journey at 13, locking myself in the wrestling room at my high school and channeling dances about spiritual states with no names. So
Ooh.
I found really unique, personalized coping better than addiction strategies very
Mhm.
early. So I very early, I had this recognition that kids who were getting into drinking and alcohol were actually really outside of themselves and pulling other kids outside of themselves. And that wasn't okay with me. And long story short, I'd always wanted to dance. And then I started dancing and it became my healthy addiction. And
Yes.
um,
Your way to process, right?
yeah,
Your processing
yeah,
tool.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
then later in my teens, I was kind of almost diagnosed as manic depressive. And I said, no, you can't medicate me. I'm going to continue to deepen my path with this. So I continued with dance and then got really into yoga. And yoga
Yeah.
was a big part of my first layer of healing, which had a lot to do. And um, the yogic path has a lot to do with organizing our systems by connecting with very coherent patterning. So
Yeah.
an asana is a form that helps you organize yourself in an organized way, and that is a route to health. Or pranayama, breathing, or meditating helps us to organize our consciousness in a way that is well organized. But it
Mhm.
is root
Mhm.
healing. It's not the same thing as root healing.
It's
It's a
very true. It
you know.
it does help regulate the nervous system, I would say,
Hmm.
in that,
For sure.
and
Well,
alignment, like you're
organs.
saying, find alignment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like the yogic path is phenomenal as um to a certain degree of
Mhm.
organizing ourselves with something coherent, of aligning our nervous systems, aligning our uh, metabolism and glandular system. And so it can be very emotionally balancing, but it isn't core healing. Like to experience, I experienced really high levels of enlightened states and psychic awareness activation from very young. But it didn't stop me from getting into really traumatic relationships. So in my late 20s, I had a really, really traumatic and difficult relationship that ended in a really violent way. And I'd say
Mm.
my second cycle of healing has been all about healing that. And it's been around psychological integration, and
Yes.
was also about plant medicine work and coming into working in community-based frameworks for personal and collective healing in the context of ceremony. And
Mhm.
um, I would say my deepest healing of coming back into home and belonging has been held in community and ceremony with plant medicine, and also dance and nature immersion.
Yeah.
And that those things have played really powerful roles in my healing. I've not worked a lot with therapists. I've never found work with therapists very useful for me.
Mhm.
Um, Personally, but the way that my ceremony community worked was better than therapy. It was like I got to be reflected by many people over and over again in a community of love and coherence and right relationship. And I think so much of our trauma is about um, it's about being really disconnected from relating, whether it's to
Yeah.
ourselves or our own bodies, or to men or women, or our sexual partners, or to our own capacity to say yes or no in a way that's really attached to our truth. And so the second phase of my healing journey really started after my 30th birthday, like after this
Oh,
massive dark night of the soul initiation of nearly being killed by an ex-lover.
yes.
And
Yes.
and then, going through a whole nother layer of like, okay, yoga was cool, but enlightenment isn't the answer at all to like our unintegrated psychological and psychospiritual content.
Mhm.
And that took
Mhm.
me even deeper into embodiment and even deeper into transpersonal psychology and ceremony.
Mhm. Mhm.
And light work too. I mean, I've had a very long journey, so I have a lot of tools in my toolbox, because I've been on the path for 35 years, and I've gone through really different phases of both of being more healed or less healed, And I think that
Mhm.
that's a really important part of the story. And also being like kind of more in remembrance and less in remembrance of who I am as a soul. And I think
Yes.
those things are very related, right? Like kind of
Yes.
knowing what animates us, being able to feel what animates us, which for me is what is soul centricity, is
Yes.
very central to that.
Yes.
Yeah.
One thing that I want to touch on, because I started going to a psychologist very young,
Mm-hmm.
and I also was blessed to find yoga in the Midwest very young, which was, I know, divine interception. But just to touch on that, because I think that psychologists in a traditional kind of sense can be very helpful for people when they need to pinpoint what their trauma like was, and explore like what is it that happened, because talking it out is very, for me, it helps me orientate. Like sometimes we know something happened, but we don't know what it was, or we don't know because we never were modeled appropriate boundaries. We don't know that it was actually a transgression of boundaries that happened. We just think it's normal. And so I do find at that level, psychology, like in the mind, is very helpful for pinpointing like what is going on? What is going on? But I find mostly the traditional psychology doesn't always have the tools to actually like heal what's going on, if that makes sense. And so I actually had this amazing psychologist when I was a teenager, because my parents sent me to these psychologists, and I finally found one that I liked, and I can still remember her name, Cheryl Latham. And I remember one day I went in and I was like, I just don't even feel like talking. I don't even know what's going on with me. I don't understand it. And literally, we would just sit there for an hour together and we wouldn't talk. And she would say, it's okay. It's okay. You don't have to talk. And it was crazy because in that hour, and sometimes I wouldn't even look at her, we would just sit there. And it was crazy because after, I felt so much better in my skin. I felt like it was such an amazing gift that she gave me. And it makes me, I can feel my tears in my eyes, because it's like, it was so not what she was like traditionally used to. But for her to have this 16-year-old in her office that's like, I don't even know, like, because I didn't know what was going on with me at the time. The things that had happened were blocked from my memory. So I didn't have access to them. All I knew was what I was experiencing, but I didn't want to like just talk about it, because then it made me feel like worse when I left. Yeah. And so I'm bringing this up because so much of healing is just being. Our natural state is healing. And it's only when we are spiraling out and we let ourselves continue to spiral out that we don't heal, that we're like, stop, we're in our own way, we're in our own path of healing, and we're stopping that. And I also love this, that you brought up this dark night of the soul, because I had a similar experience in a 4-year relationship that wasn't abusive, but we moved somewhere new together. And within 2 weeks, he had a psychological split, basically. And he became abusive and violent, and also tried to kill me. And the cool thing about that, if there is a cool thing, like you're saying, the dark night of the soul, was that was actually my inception point to figure out what had happened to me. Right. Because somehow it unearthed a lot, right? Mm. And it was like, all I could do then was like, what is it? And it took me another 3 years to unravel it. But it was like, I was a woman on a mission then, you know, because I was like, I'm not going to do that again.
Right.
That's not going to happen.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. No, not
That's a non-negotiable.
Exactly. I mean, and that's what brought me to plant medicine. I was
Crazy.
not into plants. I was like, I'm a yogi. I'm a dancer. I've got all these tools. You know, I've gone in and out of therapy. Like, I got it covered. And then I had a repeat abusive relationship, fast forward abusive relationship, and an abortion, and was like, never again, not on my watch with this person.
Right? Like, I am going to break whatever patterning it is that is calling this in. This is not okay with me.
Right.
You know?
Totally.
And for me, it took literally having to talk someone down from killing me. Literally being like, I know you don't want to kill me. But I realized too, in this moment of convincing this person not to kill me, I actually called on more of my spirit, if that makes sense, than I ever had before.
Right.
And so it elevated me even in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious, like, could you speak a little bit more about your journey and experience with the plant medicine, and like kind of what it gave you in your healing journey that maybe you weren't finding in these other tools?
Yeah. I would say, you know, it's interesting. My experience is very specific, and I'll try to speak specifically rather than generally. I could also speak generally in terms of how the entheogenic experience supports healing, but in terms of my own experience, there was this I came super reluctantly to plant medicine. I was really clear that I felt like I had all the tools I needed. Mm-hmm. And I was clear that I felt like I wanted to be pure in my healing. Like, I didn't want some substance to need to change me to heal. Mm-hmm. But then when I hit this wall, I knew that going a traditional psychotherapeutic route wasn't really what I needed, and I knew I needed some really radical help. And I got a very clear recommendation to go to Medicine Path Native American Church, which is in Berkeley, and it's run by the man who's now my spiritual father, whose name is George Gray Eagle Bertelstein. And I walked in, and I knew I was really in a place of love. It was like walking into like a level of unconditional presence in community that in all my years of workshop and all my years of dance, I had never experienced anything that felt that clean and clear and unconditional. And also like behaviorally coherent. So not like anything goes unconditional, but like, this is all love, and it's also really about being a good person with other people in a way that we really support each other, and that is clean and clear and to the point.
Yeah.
And it was also a community of prayer, so it integrated prayer into my healing practice in a way I'd never experienced before. I'd had process and guidance and light work and all kinds of other things, but I had never worked with prayer. And then in addition to that, there was sacrament, and which, you know, now I understand that sacrament works in a lot of ways. It works because it retunes us to a much fuller zone of attention, of perspective, where we can really feel how vibrant and alive and vital and real and intelligent the world is, how much it loves us, and how much beauty is really trying to crack us open all the time. But, you know, now I understand that also a lot of it is about how it takes down the default mode network, which is really where our rigidified protection strategies live in our brain. You know, it's commonly said it's where your ego lives, but really it's where your rigidified protection strategies live. So
Yes.
you get, you become able to reconfigure what I call your soul-based ego in a way that is no longer fixated on protection, but you relearn how to organize your sense of self and your behavior and your response patterns according to a different way of listening, which also is a different way of inhabiting your your neurobiology. So psychedelics are really amazing because they just help us to sit in a different seat, in a different center, and remake our way of understanding and our behavior in a way that's much more soul-centric. It's much more holistic and attuned and relational, and also like self-awakened. It's intuitively coherent, and it's also relationally coherent. And I'm a really huge, the way that the practice worked for me too is it unpacked the fallacy that awakening or healing is just something that happens inside, which I've been passionate about my whole life. I've actually been, one of the things that's kind of odd about me is I've always had this very innate kind of like neo-indigenous, like shamanic personality where I've understood inner awakeness and outer awakeness. But like the psychedelic work is so amazing for that because it really helps us return to inner coherency and feel needs and wants and boundaries and desires. But it also help and feel the God self inside, know that to be true. But then it also, like, you look around and you're like, whoa, that's true outside of me too. So it breaks down this like enlightenment is all an inside job fallacy, which is definitely not going to get us to a world that's healed and whole. Like the healed and whole world that we're trying to go to is inner and outer. And
yes.
I love community-based prayer work with psychedelics for that reason, because it was that for me. It was like, oh my God, I feel more belonging than I've ever felt before. I feel more relaxation than I've ever felt before. I feel a lot less story about it. I didn't need to have a big identity story about it to be like, I'm okay, I'm good, I'm love. And so, all of those, it was so many things for me. And it was learning to have a relationship through prayer with God, as something that was both outside of me and inside of me. And getting to see now, now 13 years later, my life is the outcome of those prayers. And I see everything I ever lived before that as prayer also, but not in the same conscious way.
Yeah, and it's what's coming up for me in that is like seeing life as an oracle, and then I'm getting this glimmer of like seeing life as a prayer, and that it's almost like the feedback loop between the two, if that makes sense. Like sending your life out as the prayer, because that's part of my process, is like sending out the prayers, asking the question, if that makes sense. And then looking at the environment, looking at nature, looking at things that feel, and sometimes it's not nature, sometimes it's comes through Instagram, right? Because all of it is God, universe, spirit permeating everything, and so then receiving that back as the oracle, as the answer, as the guidance, I would say, And I think it's interesting because I was just speaking with someone about how like sometimes we feel like prayer is for when we're on the bathroom floor, heaving into the toilet or whatever, just to go there. And it's like, no, prayer is our co-creative tool of like creation, right? It's our creation tool of like, send out your prayer and see what the response is. It doesn't mean that you're always have the question completely perfectly or whatever, you know, but I do find for myself, and I would be curious if you'd be willing to talk about this. For me, I find prayer a lot of times, like sometimes I use prayer to break down an energy wall. Like I'll ask for an energy wall to be removed if something seems stuck, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times I use prayer and ask for guidance around something. Like, show me where the energy. I come from a very Taoist background, so I always see it as like my life is like, you know, a river kind of, and like, where is the energy flowing?
Mm-hmm.
And trying to just go with that where it's flowing instead of like where I think it needs to go, you know? And so I'm curious, like, could you share with us maybe, or is it appropriate to ask, like, what does prayer look like for you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, my practice of prayer is really simple, and the
Beautiful.
grammar of it is thank you. So, you know, that gratitude always being a gateway to organize coherence in our field and open the heart and organize, literally organize the way our field ripples through the universe in a way that's elevated. And just a way to connect with the wonder, obviously. And so thank you, thank you for this call. Thank you for the opportunity to get to know a new soul in a resonant way. Thank you for the braiding of our wisdom in this moment. And then the next part of the prayer would be, help me, or I'm struggling with. And so, in this moment, I'm not struggling with anything, so I don't have anything to say like that. But earlier we could have said, I'm struggling with Zoom. Please help me to get Zoom working again. That's an actual prayer, right? Or God, can you, gods of internet interface, interwebs, please help us to keep Zoom open for the rest of this call. We would really be deeply grateful for that. Real prayer. So, and the next thing would be, and I need, or I want, I want to further human healing. Please help. I offered this as a prayer, I want more of this. I want more of these conversations in my life. Thank you.
Yes. And thank you, Samantha, for joining us in this call. This has just been delightful, and I'm really appreciative of just your deep level of sharing and just bringing into our awareness the capacity that our plant allies have to help us in our spiritual journey, and how we have co-evolved with these amazing plant species for eons. And, I obviously invite on our website, we all have all of your info so people can access more interaction with you. And I would love to just close, by taking a couple moments of breath and just, again, grounding in, kind of closing up sacred space and sending this out as a prayer. And may all beings everywhere be happy and free. And may our thoughts, words, and actions contribute to the happiness and freedom of all beings everywhere. And thank you so much for your authenticity and presence.